Hello everyone. Today we will be reading from The Complete Fairy Tales of the Brothers Grimm. The tale today be The Glass Coffin. Let no one ever say that a poor tailor cannot advance far in the world and achieve great honors. He needs only to hit upon the right person, and most important, to have good luck. Once there was such a tailor who was a pleasing and smart apprentice. He set out on his travels and wandered into a large forest, and since he did not know the way, he got lost. Night fell, and there was nothing left for him to do but to search for a place to sleep in this desolate spot. Of course, he could have made a bed in the soft moss, but his fear of wild animals would not have him let him rest. Eventually, he decided to spend the night in a tree. He looked for a large oak tree, climbed to the top, and thanked God that he had carried his flat iron with him. Otherwise, the wind that blew over the treetops would have swept him away. After he had spent a few hours in the dark, not without shivering in his shoes, he saw a light shining from a place nearby. Since he thought that people might be living there, and that he would feel better off with them than on the branches of a tree, he climbed down carefully and headed toward the light, which led him toward a small cottage made out of reeds and bushes. Bravely he knocked, and the door opened. By the glow of the light that issued forth, he could see an old, gray-haired little man, clad in a coat sewn together with brightly colored patches. "Who are you, and what do you want?" the man asked, with a snarling voice. "I'm a poor tailor," the young man replied, "and I was overtaken by the night here in the wilderness. I beseech you to let me stay in your cottage until morning." "Get on your way," responded the old man in a sullen tone. "I don't want to have anything to do with tramps. Find your lodging somewhere else." With these words, he intended to turn his back on the tailor, but the young man held him so tightly by his coat-tails and pleaded in such a touching way that the old man, who was not so cruel as he had made himself seem, finally softened and took him into his cottage, where he gave the tailor something to eat and then directed him to a very good bed in a corner. The tired tailor did not need to be rocked to sleep. Indeed, he slept like an angel until morning, and he would not have even considered getting up if he had not been startled by a loud noise, a terrible roaring and bellowing that penetrated the walls of the house. To his surprise, the tailor, moved by his courage, got dressed quickly and hurried outside, where he saw a large black bull and a beautiful stag in the midst of a violent fight near the little house. They charged at each other with such tremendous fury that the ground trembled from their trampling, and the air resounded with their cries. For a long time it was unclear who would win the fight. Finally, the stag plunged his antlers into the body of his opponent, whereupon the bull sank to the ground with a horrible groan, and was finished off by a few more thrusts from the stag. The tailor, who had watched the battle with astonishment, continued to stand there motionless when the stag bounded over to him, and then, before he could escape, the stag lifted him up with his huge antlers. The tailor did not have any time to think about what was happening. He was swiftly carried over hill and dale, mountain and valley, meadow and forest. He clutched the antlers with both hands and resigned himself to his fate. It seemed as if he were flying until finally the stag stopped in front of a rocky cliff and let the tailor slide gently to the ground. The tailor, who was more dead than alive, needed a long time to regain his composure. When he had more or less recovered, the stag, who was standing next to him, knocked his antlers against a door in the cliff with such force that it sprang open. Flames of fire shot out, followed by a great deal of smoke, which made him lose sight of the stag. The tailor did not know what to do or where to turn to escape this desolate spot and get back to people and society again. As he stood there, unable to make a decision, a voice sounded from inside the cliff and called to him. "Enter without fear. No harm will be done to you. To be sure, he wavered, but he was also driven by a mysterious power. So he obeyed the voice and went through an iron door into a large, spacious hall. The ceiling, walls, and floor were made of glittering, polished blocks of stone. Signs were engraved in the stone, which he could not decipher. Full of astonishment, he looked at everything and was just about to leave when the voice sounded once more and said to him, "Step upon the stone that lies in the middle of the hall. Your great fortune awaits you." His courage had grown so much that he was not afraid to follow the order. The stone began to give way under his feet, and he sank slowly into the depths. When the tailor reached solid ground again and looked around, he found himself in a hall that was the same size as the previous one. However, there was even more to see and admire. In niches carved into the walls stood vases of transparent glass filled with a colored vapor or with blue steam. Two large glass chests sat facing each other on the floor of the hall, and they immediately aroused his curiosity. He walked over to one of them and peeked inside. In it he saw a beautiful dwelling, similar to a castle, surrounded by farmhouses, stables, barns, and a lot of other fine things. Everything was tiny but carefully and delicately made, as though carved with great precision by a skilled hand. He would not have taken his eyes off this rarity if the voice had not spoken to him once more. It commanded him to turn around and look at the glass chest that stood across from him. His astonishment became even greater when he caught sight of an exceedingly beautiful maiden. She lay as if asleep, wrapped in her long blonde hair, which seemed like a precious cloak. Her eyes were tightly shut. However, the bright complexion of her face and a ribbon that bobbed up and down as she breathed left no doubt that she was alive. With a pounding heart, the tailor was regarding the beauty when suddenly she opened her eyes, gave a start, and then stirred in joy at the sight of him. "Good heavens," she exclaimed, "I shall soon be free. Quick, quick, help me out of my prison. If you push back the bolt of this glass coffin, I'll be saved." The tailor obeyed without hesitating, and she immediately lifted up the glass top, climbed out, and rushed into a corner of the hall, where she wrapped herself in a large cloak. Then she sat down on a stone and called the young man to her. After she gave him a friendly kiss on his lips, she said, "I had been hoping for a long time, my savior, that you'd come. Now God in his mercy has led you to me and put an end to my suffering. And on this very day that my suffering has ended, your happiness shall begin. Heaven has chosen you as my husband, and you shall spend the rest of your life in joy and peace, and you shall be provided with an abundance of earthly possessions. Sit down now and listen to my fateful story. I am the daughter of a rich count. My parents died when I was still at a tender age. In accord with their last will, I was to be raised by my older brother. We loved each other so dearly and were so much alike in our ideas and inclinations that we both decided never to marry, but to remain together for the rest of our lives. There was never a lack of company in our house. Neighbors and friends visited us frequently, and we were most hospitable to everyone. Well, one evening it happened that a stranger came riding to our castle and requested a night's lodging because he had been unable to reach the next town. We granted his request cordially and politely, and during dinner he entertained us with this conversation that was elegantly mixed with stories. My brother took such a great liking to him that he asked him to spend a few days with us, and after some hesitation he agreed. We got up from the table very late at night, and the stranger was shown to his room. Tired as I was, I hurried to spread my limbs on a soft bed, but no sooner had I fallen asleep than I was wakened by the sound of a soft, lovely music. Since I had no idea where it was coming from, I wanted to call my chambermaid who slept in the next room. Yet to my astonishment, I found that I was deprived of my speech by a mysterious power. And I felt as if overcome by a nightmare, unable to utter the slightest sound. In the meantime, by the light of my night lamp, I saw the stranger enter my room through two doors that had been tightly locked. He approached me and said that through magic arts that stood at his command, he had caused the lovely music to sound in order to wake me. He had then forced his way through all the locks with the intention of offering me his heart and hand. However, his magic arts repulsed me so much that I did not deem his offer worthy of a reply. He stood there a while without moving, probably with the expectation of receiving a favorable answer. But when I continued to remain silent, he declared angrily that he would revenge himself and find some means to punish my arrogance. Then he left the room. I slept a most restless night and could manage to fall asleep only toward morning. When I awoke, I rushed to my brother to tell him what had happened, but I didn't find him in his room. His servant told me that he had gone out hunting with a stranger at daybreak. Immediately, I sensed that something was wrong. I got dressed quickly, had my palfrey saddled, and rode in a full gallop toward the forest in the company of a servant. However, my servant's horse stumbled and broke its legs, and he could not follow me. I continued on my way without stopping, and in a few minutes I saw the stranger heading toward me and leading a beautiful stag by a rope. I asked him where he had left my brother and how he had come upon the stag, whose eyes were filled with large tears. Instead of answering me, he began to laugh loudly. I became furious, pulled out a pistol, and fired it at the monster. But the bullet bounced off his chest and rebounded into the head of my horse. I fell to the ground, and the stranger mumbled some words that robbed me of my consciousness. When I regained my senses, I found myself in a glass coffin in this underground cavern. The magician appeared once more and told me that he had turned my brother into a stag. Moreover, he had reduced my castle with all its surroundings to such a tiny size that they could be put into the other glass chest along with my people, who had all been transformed into vapor and were confined in glass bottles. However, he said if I could comply with his desire, it would be easy for him to return everything to its original condition. He had only to open the containers and everything would regain its natural form. I refused to answer him just as I had done before. He disappeared and left me lying in my prison, and I fell into a deep sleep. Among the many things I envisioned in my sleep, that which consoled me most was the image of a young man who came and set me free. And today, when I opened my eyes, I saw you and knew that my dream had been fulfilled. Now I want you to help me make the other things I saw come true. First, we must lift the other glass chest that contains my castle and move it to that broad stone. As soon as the glass chest was moved to the stone slab, the stone began to rise and carried the maiden and young man up through an opening into the upper hall. From there they could easily reach the open air. Then the maiden opened the top of the chest, and it was wonderful to see how the castle, houses, and farms expanded and grew rapidly back to their natural size. The maiden and young man returned to the underground cabin and had the vapor-filled containers carried up by the stone. No sooner did the maiden open the bottles than the blue steam shot out and transformed itself into living creatures, whom the maiden recognized as her people and servants. Her joy became even greater when her brother, who had killed the magician in the form of a bull, came out of the forest in his human form. And on that very same day, the maiden kept her promise and gave her hand at the altar to the lucky tailor. Wow, that was an interesting story. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for visiting my channel. I hope you have a wonderful and spooky day.